Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of A Peek Behind, this time not EU careers, but being EPSO's director. That's right, I'm here today in Brussels to interview a very special guest, the director of the European Personnel Selection Office, Minna Vuorio. Minna, thank you so much for agreeing to join me. It is indeed a great pleasure to have you across the table. And I would like to start maybe with a bit of a cliche, but you are coming to the end of your 5-year mandate as director of the European Personnel Selection Office, EPSO in short. What was it like when you arrived in 2020? What has been the evolution of EPSO in these past 5 years?
Thank you very much, Luis. It's a great pleasure to be part of this as well. When we go to the beginning of my mandate, you say so-called pandemic. It's not a so-called pandemic. It was a real pandemic. When I started, and now everybody has kind of forgotten everything about the pandemic. When I arrived in mid-May 2020, in March, all competition activity has stopped because of the pandemic. There was nothing we could find, no concrete plans on doing remote testing in any format. But when we started, we thought that this pandemic is going to be over by the summer. And by the autumn, it started to be very clear that this is going to be changing the way we do competitions, or we wait just too long. So the pandemic was really an important element, although there had been already discussions for quite some time within the institutions and in a special working group, interinstitutional working group, on how to do competitions faster in a more modern way. And that was quite a comprehensive analysis. And that was forming a basis for the whole thinking. The remote testing was not so much on discussions in this special working group. It was more on how to, in general, make the competitions quicker, what would be the accurate and the most effective test portfolio, what kind of tests should be included, what not. But they have not really gone into remote testing discussions much. When I saw the recommendations of the special working group, there was nothing online on site. But that came on top of the other reforms.
Right. Well, nowadays, we run all of our selection procedures, be it competitions or contract agent selection, tool selection procedures online. Would you say that this was one of the biggest achievements of your 5-year mandate? Is there something else that you would like to highlight?
I have kind of a couple of positives and a couple of negatives on things that went well. More than the remote testing, I would say the new competition model in itself and its achievement in a quite complex stakeholder environment where all institutions are involved and a lot of people have opinions on how the competitions should be run. So that, for me, was more decisive element. Come to a compromise which would still be a very serious professional selection process, but do it much, much quicker and in a more modern way. So that is one of the biggest. Then the IT infrastructure is the kind of a second achievement, although it's not ready, but it's really on the go. And I want to mention one further thing. In these 5 years, we have changed everything. There's not much that has remained the same. And I have to give a big admiration to the staff. I mean, the resilience of the staff, it has not been easy. You all know, you've all heard part of the turmoil, and it has been a bumpy road, but the staff has been really, really resilient in this. So these are the three really positives. On the negatives, I would say that the remote testing, it would have been better to prepare more, but we then had to jump into the water. We kind of, it's a little bit of a blessing as well, because without the pandemic, we might still be in discussions on what kind of a remote testing and whether it would be remote testing. The fact that it was remote or nothing helped us to go there. But I do think there's still much to improve. You know, we are now in the end of a procurement process, and we hopefully will have a better partner for the future. But that's the thing where I'm not terribly happy on how it has gone. Second negative, I want to say that the legal framework we operate is quite also outdated. And I often say that it's almost like playing flipper. If you know, in the bars, they used to have this game which is called flipper, where a ball goes there and then it tries to find a place. Here, one day, the ball will stop. If we don't have any loosening of the legal framework, we have to remember there's been thousands of candidates who have passed and who are now working in the European institutions. So that should not be neglected in all of this noise.
The complexity of our governance structure and this very wide stakeholder environment were really big surprises for me. And the fact that we have to respond to so many legitimate interests, I should say. We have to respond to the concerns of the member states, because obviously we are selecting, let's say, their citizens to join the EU civil service. And this allows me to ask you another question. The governance structure is very complex. And I think that very few leaders have to deal with a structure like this. What was the challenge for you of having to respond on the one hand to a commissioner and on the other hand to a management board with all the institutions and bodies represented there?
One of the reasons I wanted this job is that I thought that, okay, I don't really have a very clear-cut boss, not one director general who would be my boss and who would. And it's tempting because it gives you a kind of a margin of putting your ideas forward. And I was quite tempted by that. And it has also been the most rewarding element in my job. But it has also been the most difficult because, of course, the 10 institutions have different interests, sometimes conflicting interests, and sometimes the stakeholder relations take a very unexpected turn. It is very, very complex, but not that different when I am an official from the council, where the council does that all the time with the member states. So I kind of like that aspect as well. And even if sometimes it's been very difficult, especially when things went wrong and the client is not happy, it's a very tough place to be. But there was also always, like I mentioned, the negative noise around the candidate experience. There was always positives as well. And same goes with the stakeholders. Even in the difficult times, there were constructive support. The management board also tried to contribute in how to get out of it. And that I found interesting and challenging in times, yes, and sometimes very challenging, but also a source of inspiration because you get so many different angles and there's always somebody who will come up with something that you didn't think of yourself, which kind of brings a certain humility into the position.
I wanted Minna to jump to another topic, one that is maybe closer to my heart, communication. I've heard many people say that one of the things that you changed was how much and how well we communicate. I know that you are someone who puts a lot of value on transparency, and it's something that a lot of people I met have told me about EPSO. During your mandate, that we do communicate a lot more. Was this something conscious, or is it we need to be more active when it comes to communication?
This actually is both conscious choice and the change in approach in EPSO in general, but it also is cultural. And we've discussed quite a lot about this with the member states, that one of the reasons why this underrepresentation or representation issue in general is such an important issue is that the different nationalities bring different values, and transparency clearly is one of the very top values in Nordic countries. So it is a bit inside me already, but I also think that my discussions, especially in the beginning of my mandate, with the then Secretary General of the Ombudsman on this transparency issue opened my eyes a bit, that there are certain things that we can't be transparent. We are not going to be transparent of what questions we are going to put to the candidate.
Right.
But we the idea is neither to be secretive about things which we don't need to be secretive. More we kind of explain, more I believe there will be understanding. Not everybody shares this view. I am aware of that. And I'm also aware that sometimes might have been a better choice not to be so open about everything. And I've learned lessons on the way, also on when to communicate and to whom. So that I think is quite important element in a complex stakeholder environment, and carefully think what you say before you say it. But I do consider this transparency as a value, but also as a kind of a, how would I put it now correctly, that for the candidates, for example, that we tell as much as we can in advance so that they can prepare. Because when they also, the ones that enter, things are not going to be easy always inside the institutions, but the one of the elements is that you have to find out information and share information, and then your work is also going to be easier. That idea of a collaborative work and sharing is very much a value that I think will bring things forward.
Minna, I was listening to you talking about your experience, and I must obviously ask you about what next. What would you tell your successor now that you have a few weeks ahead of you before you end your mandate, about EPSO, about what they should consider to be their first priority when they get the job?
My only advice I would like to give is that it's a tough job. It's not an easiest job at all. So take care of yourself. In a way, that's a little bit my kind of, how would I say, the advice side of the thing. But of course, we will prepare a proper handover on where we are going, because we are in the kind of end of a transformation, but a lot of implementation things are still ongoing. So we will do that in writing, and we will have we had just a good team building event with my own team, so that who is going to help the new incoming director then with what dossiers, etc. And like we've done the same with the heads of units who does what. So there will be a package of information available. There will be a bunch of good people available to help out, and I'm also offering myself. I'm not going to push any advice, but I am available still for some time in Brussels. So I've gotten some support from my predecessors, and it has been very helpful in difficult moments. Also in kind of how to manage your own ego and your own frustration in difficult moments, and that has been helpful. So I will be available, but I'm not going to push anything. I will leave the room also for the successor to find his or her way.
Right. Minna, before we wrap up, I wanted to come back to EU careers, because after all, this podcast series has also been about EU careers. You have had a long career with the EU institutions. You're Finnish, and we know that we need more Finns to join the EU civil service. And I know that you have been promoting the EU civil service, EU careers among Finnish prospective candidates. How do you feel about that? And what are your views about the many opportunities, the many things that the EU civil service has to offer, in particular when it comes to some candidates who may not sort of know so much about it?
Yes, first of all, I have been quite active also in Finland, like you have been active in Portugal, and many of our EPSO colleagues have been active in their own member states, and it has an added value. Of course, we have a professional outreach and communication team who does that whenever needed, but sometimes it brings an extra element. And I consider it rather my role as a staff ambassador role. And I think every civil servant of the European institutions should be a staff ambassador at the same time, because we all work here, we know how it is. What are the challenges? What are the rewards? What I normally say to whoever young people, not only to the Finns, but when I meet trainees or some other prospective candidates, is that it's not easy. It's not supposed to be easy. It's a complex system, but it's extremely interesting. It is really quite a young official can have a job where there's real meaning in it. You have a possibility to have your say, to be part of something which is bigger. And even if it is all this shaping Europe together sounds a bit like a cliche, promotional thing, but there has truth behind it. It really is the meaningfulness of the jobs. And we have also realized that it works really well when a person who is excited about his or her job talks about it with motivation and enthusiasm, and it is a very powerful tool to attract.
We are coming to the end of our interview, and I wanted to ask you if there's anything that I didn't ask you that you wanted to share with our listeners.
I had a bit reflection while preparing a bit for this podcast, although we never go according to the plan, but it is this core mission of EPSO as well, to select new people, and you need to be quite bold in it. And the institutions said to us that, and you remember we did the first diversity survey ever, and what we found out is that we are quite in a narrow profile type. Nothing wrong in that profile, but we do miss quite a lot of different profiles. And this idea of being in the beginning of that, you have to be quite bold, you have to be quite courageous. A lot of people say that we support innovation and transformation, but when you actually do it, you get very little applause, quite a lot of criticism, but you still need it. And I do believe in this core mission of EPSO as well. And I think many people do, and many institutions do. And that kind of is an extraordinary place to be. So I don't regret having this tough 5 years of my life behind me. I do think I've learned probably more than in any other. It is through hardships what we often learn. And one of the things that I think everybody needs to learn is that in this situation is that you need to recruit people that are better in certain areas than yourself. And it is humility as well. You tend to, and research actually confirms this, that we tend to recruit people like us. Even it's an unconscious bias, but we all have it. And even if we know it, we still do it. But we should actually recruit people who are better than us in many things.
Thank you, Minna. This was a really interesting conversation. I wanted to tell our listeners that this will be, at least for the moment, one of our last podcasts. It does not mean that EPSO will not come up with another series of podcasts, but probably only towards the end of the year. So also an opportunity for me to thank everyone who has been here across this table at the RTD studios in Brussels, being interviewed by me. And this is it. This was the last of the episodes, A Peek Behind EU Careers, this time a peek behind being an EPSO director. Thank you to everyone who's been listening to our series. Goodbye. Thank you, Minna. It was a pleasure.
Thank you, Louis. It was a pleasure for me as well.